Hello and welcome to Absolute Trust Talk. I'm Kirsten Howe today. I'm the host of this live streaming podcast. Um, I one of my very favorite type of episode is when my associate Madison is on the show with me and we can sit and talk about, gossip about celebrity estate plans. But my second favorite kind of show is when I have people on the show who are doing really great things that are really helpful to the community. And that's what we have today. So I'm very, very excited about this. I'm just going to start by laying some groundwork. I don't think this is a surprise to anyone. The population of people with developmental disabilities, such as autism, is growing every year in the United States. And so many of these young people will require support and assistance as they become adults throughout their lives. And this support is typically supplied by parents during childhood. But of course, that's not really a permanent solution. And every parent of a child with disabilities worries about what will happen to their child when they're no longer able to provide that support. And so in recent years, families have been trying to figure that out and oftentimes coming together, planning together, trying to come up with a solution to create some kind of a supportive residential community for their adult children with developmental disabilities. And today we are very fortunate to be able to talk to a couple of people who are actively involved in one such community, but maybe even more importantly, they're helping other people figure out how to form their own communities. My guests today are the executive director, Olivia Vane, and one of the founding family members, Mark Jackson, of Sweetwater Spectrum, which is a community that opened in the Sonoma area. And they're going to talk to us about how they did it and what they've learned and what they are doing to help others. So Olivia Vane is the executive director at Sweetwater Spectrum LLC, and she's been working sort of indirectly and yet closely with Sweetwater for about 5 or 6 years. Well, first of all, by working for another organization that provided services to Sweetwater. She holds a Bachelor of Science degree in social psychology from University of Skövde, and I probably mispronounced that, and a Master of Science in Psychology from University of Gothenburg in Sweden, and a Master of Public Health from Mid-Sweden University. She's Swedish, by the way. She was born and raised in Sweden and has been here in the US since 2013. My other guest, Mark Jackson, is a former president of Sweetwater Spectrum, and as I said earlier, one of the founding families in Sweetwater. Mark holds a BA from Middlebury College and an MBA from Cal, UC Berkeley, for those of you who are listening elsewhere in the country. He's a frequent speaker at conferences focused on the kind of issues we're going to be talking about, and very much an advocate in the field. Thank you both so much for being here. I'm really looking forward to talking to you.
Well, thank you, Kirsten.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so let's start by hearing from one or both of you some background on Sweetwater. What is it, and how did it get started?
Well, I probably get that one since I've been around since day one. Olivia will tell you, I'm sort of a statistics geek. So I have a 32-year-old son with autism. Back when he was diagnosed, roughly 4% of the people in the DDS system in California had autism. Now it's about 40%. And almost 70% of new intakes into the system are people with autism. 75% of people with disabilities in between the ages of 22 and 41 in California live at home. Nationwide for autism, it's over 85% of adults with autism still live at home. We were fortunate to have our son go to a private school in Boston for 10 years. He was aging out in 2013 at age 21. We were fortunate to meet a family at a Christmas party back in 2006 in a similar situation with a daughter who was going to be aging out of the system. And we essentially had, 5 or 6 years to figure this out. So as much as we consider ourselves pioneers in the world, I mean, we started visiting farmsteads throughout the United States, places you may not be familiar with, like in Innisfree Village in Virginia, Bittersweet Farms in Ohio, Down Home Ranch in Texas. Just sort of come up with an idea of what we thought would be a good living situation for our children. Formed a nonprofit, Sweetwater, in 2009, and started looking for property. We were looking at 20, 30-acre ranches out in the rural areas. And the more we dug into it, we didn't think that was going to be a great fit for families wanting to put their children there, but also equally finding staff in a rural area is not as easy. So by luck, purely, we found a site in Sonoma, downtown Sonoma, a 3-acre site, late 2010, right around Thanksgiving. The city of Sonoma bent over backwards to work with us, sold us the property. We spent 2 years, 2010 to 11, designing it, started building it in late 2011, opened in January 7th, 2013. And so we've been in business for 10 years now.
And okay, and how many residents are there now, Olivia?
At the moment, we have 16 spots for residents to live here full time. We are currently also expanding, so we are just a couple of weeks away from finishing our 5th residential building. So we'll be going from 16 to 20.
That's great. That's really great. And it's a lovely property, right? I mean, it's not just houses. There's a swimming pool.
Yeah, we have two hot tubs, a gym, a community center. We have
greenhouse.
Yeah, fully functional farm. Chickens. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds lovely. I mean, it sounds fitting for Sonoma. Yeah, but
yeah, we're only a couple of minutes from the plaza. The location couldn't be better.
Oh, yeah. So the residents can actually walk downtown if that's appropriate for them.
Walk. We also have bikes on site that they can use.
And all of the residents are somewhere on the autism spectrum?
Yes, the current residents are on the autism spectrum to some degree or other disabilities as well. Anybody with a disability can apply for admissions here. So it's not exclusive autism. It just happened that that's the current situation.
That's how it is configured now. Okay. Okay. And so, Mark, you said that you formed a nonprofit. So this nonprofit owns the property.
That's correct. We're essentially I call it a landlord on steroids, probably, is because the nonprofit owns the property, and we have services that are provided through it's called Supported Living Services in California, from a third-party organization.
Yes, the funding for the staffing comes from the regional center, North Bay Regional Center in this area, and then there are vendors connected to the regional center that provide the supported living services in the home. But there's all the other vendors involved in our residents' lives as well, such as day program, transportation, behavioral services, volunteer programs, and so on.
But the Sweetwater staff is only, Olivia, why don't you tell, Sweetwater has its own staff that supports the entire infrastructure, though.
Yes. Yeah. So Sweetwater as a nonprofit has 4 full-time staff members. It's me, the executive director, an enrichment coordinator who oversees and implements programming that we have on site, as well as an executive admin fund development person, and we also have a maintenance manager. On top of that, we have contractors part-time, accountant, as well as a part-time farmer.
Oh, okay. What do you grow there on your farm?
Primarily microgreens. We sell microgreens at the farmers market here in Sonoma, and we also donate the majority of the produce that we have on site. We donate to other nonprofits.
Oh, that's nice.
We had a full acre farm at one point, but we couldn't. It grew so much produce that we couldn't keep up with selling it. So now we put a house in and we put a solar array. So now we're down to about a half acre of the greenhouse and a farm, and chickens are about a half acre.
Okay, and that's more manageable.
Yes.
And we thought our kids were going to be the gentlemen farmers, and that's why we're looking at the farmstead communities. But we abandoned the idea of being out in the rural area, and we still ended up with a pretty decent sized farm. So it worked out.
It was kind of best of both worlds.
Yeah.
Okay, and so your Sweetwater staff are kind of dedicated to keeping the facility running, the physical plant and various aspects of that. And then the supportive services are coming sort of through the regional center via various vendors. What kind of supportive services are we talking about? Just as I know it's a wide variety, I'm sure, but just some examples.
So the services that our residents have here on site is called supported living services, which is individual. Each person has an individual program plan and an individual service plan with all the vendors involved. And it could be anything from medication management, help with doctor's appointments, food shopping, planning, meals, getting around the community. It's all really depends on each person's individual schedules and their goals and what they want to accomplish living independently.
Mm-hmm.
It's very different. It's very different than a licensed home. You could have some residents have 24/7 support, one-on-one staffing. Some receive a couple hours a day. It's very different than a licensed community where everything is more structured. This is more tailored to the individual.
I see. Okay. So the supportive services are, in my original scenario, taking the place of what the parents have been providing over the years, and they're now enabling these young people to be a little more independent, certainly
Yes.
independent from their parents.
Yes. And then, of course, Sweetwater is unique in the sense that we work together as a nonprofit ourselves with the vendors that come on site to expand on goals and bring in our network and our connections to develop what we call our enrichment program, which could be anything from physical activities, art, the sensory, volunteering, job opportunities. So we work closely with the vendors on site to make sure that what is the full life, what is a life with purpose, and what is quality of life beyond basic needs.
Yeah, we added a layer on top of this versus just a traditional housing provider. We added the layer of Olivia and her staff on top to be almost a surrogate parent network to keep watching our kids. Some of our families live in Colorado, some live 3 or 4 hours away. We have families that don't live nearby, but we do rely on the Sweetwater staff to sort of fulfill a role of eyes and ears on the ground.
Right. Yeah. And it sounds like it's beyond just providing the day-to-day basic what you need to live your life. It's you focusing also on enrichment, and that's really
Yes.
an interesting aspect. I like that. So Sweetwater owns the building. The residents pay rent to live there, I'm assuming.
Yes.
And I'm guessing.
And their food and utilities. They pay for food and utilities also.
Okay. But probably their rent doesn't cover the expense involved in maintaining this facility. So therefore, that's where the nonprofit aspect comes in. So Sweetwater is also acquiring funding from other sources. You want to talk about that a little bit? Probably Olivia, that's you.
Yes, being a nonprofit, we depend on public support and donations and grants, and that is something that we're actively involved in. The community fee and rent doesn't necessarily account for all of the things that we want to do every year. And of course, the expansion project will bring the need for fundraising down a little bit since we'll have additional funds coming in each month. So that's another aspect why we're really excited about expanding our campus as well.
Yeah, you'll be able to have a few more people. Are those spots in the soon to open residence, are they filled? I'm assuming that they are.
Many has been filled for a while.
For years,
Yes,
yeah.
we do
I'm
have.
guessing, yeah.
Yeah,
You
we
have a
do
wait
have a
list.
waiting list,
Yeah.
and of course we would house everyone. I always tell the families we would have an entire city of Sonoma if we could, but we only have our 3 acres at the moment.
Right. Okay. Any plans for adding additional structures?
I think we'll have to get through the fifth home first and get that up and going and stabilize. I think that's
Yeah.
one of the pieces of what makes Sweetwater really special. We've been doing this for now 10 years, so we figured many of the aspects out as we've been going. So we are a very stable, functional program on every level. So we are in a very good position to expand and focus on that aspect at this point.
And okay, so not too long ago, we had on our show Susan Riggle, who is one of the founders at Clearwater Ranch, also in Sonoma. And that's a different model from the Sweetwater model. And I know that there's some crossover, or you've helped each other along the way. Can you talk about the difference between those two models? Either one of you, I don't know who feels most comfortable.
I probably have a little more on this one. Yeah, I mean, Susan and Living Unlimited's model is an ownership model. It's an LLC. Families are buy-in and own a percentage interest in the property and the LLC with a right to occupy a unit for their children. It has the advantage, which I think is very attractive, of if you, for some reason, have to exit the community and your child goes to live somewhere else, you do have the ability to sell your interest and recapture your investment in the property, which is attractive. It was a challenge for Sweetwater early on that we don't have that. Donations to Sweetwater are donations, and they don't, get them back if you leave, if your child's living there.
I see.
We have the advantage of being able to fundraise to supplement, the resources from our rent and community fee. They would have to do capital calls for families if they run out of capital. It's a very different model. I do think Sweetwater is more of an anomaly because of we had to raise close to $10 million to do this. One of the big objections was from families that might want to have their children living there, that there's no quid pro quo as far as you make a donation, there still is no guarantee your child's living there. You just can't, as a nonprofit, you can't make that guarantee. So large donors had, the children do live there, had to be very comfortable that A, they were going to get in, and B, they were going to stay there.
Yeah.
Yes, our structure is a month-to-month lease, and of course there are community rules and parts of the lease agreement that you, as any tenant, and I'm sure in a community like Clearwater, there are similar documentation in place that there need to be an ability to comply with the rules and regulation of where you live. Of course, that may look a little bit different when you are serving this population. And we don't
pay real estate tax. We don't pay real estate taxes, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's, for our case, it would have been another $150,000 a year probably. Divided by 16 residents. I mean, it's $700 or $800 a month just for real estate taxes per person. So it's a big number.
And it just depends on the families too. Some families prefer the buy-in model. You have a bigger upfront cost to move in, and then there's some monthly fees involved in the buy-in models as well. Here, there's no large upfront cost. You have a regular lease agreement as you would in any apartment or having your child live independently. And it's also easier if it's not working out, or if you wish to try something else at some point to of course, get out of a lease versus bought into a bigger project.
Yeah, so it's a little, there's pluses and minuses to each one. It's easier to just come to a place like Sweetwater and say, sign me up, I have money to pay rent and all that. But somebody's got to start that nonprofit. You're relying upon there being a nonprofit there to access. Whereas with the buy-in model, a few families could get together and create their own project.
Yes.
Which is also a lot of work.
And the cost of and the cost of building today and buying property, especially in California, is so different than 10 years ago. So many of these projects have no choice but to be a buy-in model, because you need the funds to develop and build and create the project.
Yeah. Well, I'm just curious. I hadn't planned to ask you this question, but it just occurred to me that I wonder if you're seeing or you're aware of more activity in less expensive states. California is an expensive place to live. Any place in California is expensive.
Yes.
We just got an email from a place in Ohio the other day that we'd done some helping them, and they bought how big is their site? 5 acres, and it cost $300,000.
Yeah.
I mean, if we had to buy the Sweetwater site over again today, it would be over $3 million. I mean, it cost us $1.5 million 12 years ago.
Yeah.
So our site would be over $3 million. And the cost of
land.
construction. Yeah, and our cost of construction is $500 a square foot. You go to Ohio and it's $200. I mean, you do see a lot more, and we do consulting with families and across the United States, and there's no comparison. So the buy-in model out here is sort of the only viable model that works right now. I don't know anybody out in California that's doing a nonprofit model right now, really.
Okay. Well, and so that brings me to the other aspect of what you two are doing. You're not just involved with Sweetwater, the community. You make yourselves available as consultants in a variety of ways to other people who are interested in doing what you've done or learning from you, tapping into your expertise to help them create their own communities.
Yes, as Sweetwater has matured and stabilized, and we know what we're doing at this point, I think we have had the ability to spend more of our time, particularly Mark and I, to help other communities all over the United States, as well as in Europe, Asia, all over the world, really, to build a community or similar settings, larger, smaller, different settings. And we do whatever we can to help them and share our knowledge, and also understand how service structures work where they are and in their states and in their countries. So our replication and new housing efforts to help others create a Sweetwater of their own is really a big piece of what we do today.
Yeah. A lot of right now is front end planning, though. It's not, we don't get too much into construction management. And right now, a lot of it's just is families that were where we were back in 2006 and 7, and saying, how do we do it? And it revolves around putting the pieces together and laying out a written plan, saying, okay, here's step A, B, C, D, E, and okay, once you get those done, let's go on to step F. And, it's the basics. You have to find the time, money, the knowledge to get started, and then some partners. And how do you find a piece of property? How do I reach out to the community? How do I do fundraising if I'm going to do a nonprofit? How do I set up an LLC? And so a lot of the stuff is very, very front end to get people sort of off their chairs and moving, because it's daunting. I mean,
yeah, I can imagine that it would be, and it would be very comforting to know that there are people who can sort of help you walk through that process, at least get the starting steps taken care of. Now, I understand. So in that vein, you have people coming to you asking for tours of Sweetwater from all over the world, probably. And you also, I know on your website, you've got what you call a toolkit to sort of help people who are maybe a little do-it-yourself inclined at least start looking at documents and start figuring these things out. And then you offer consultation services as well. So there's all kinds of ways that you can help people.
It's really interesting because we try to keep it very easy to use and a great starting point on the website. But oftentimes when people are 2-3 years in, they may need this is my project in particular. I'm in this state or in this location, and I'm tackling these and these steps next. And that's where the more one-on-one consulting with Mark or myself usually comes in, where we spend significant time oftentimes to just dig into what is going on with your project in particular, and how can we help you in particular with the next steps. And it's really fun. I hear from groups of parents and professionals 1 year, and then 2 years later they come back and like, Olivia, I'm here now. Now I need help with this process. So it's years in the making, and we're available any step of the way to help in any way we can.
And not surprising, a lot of it's early on is budgeting. People that don't have a real estate background or finance background may want to do something like this. They haven't developed their board or their team to the point where they have somebody, and honestly do a lot of budgets, telling them, finding out what land costs in their area, what construction costs are, and say, okay, your project is, how many people are you serving, and honing down their vision to, okay, you got a project for 20 people, you need 3 acres. It's going to cost you X to build it. And X, your rent's got to be X to sustain it. And that's, it gives people a framework to understand where to go from there.
Even personnel cost and things like that is something that needs to be considered. Our personnel structure didn't look the same 10 years ago as it does now. So we're also available to help kind of talk about our experience around that. Maintaining property and the cost of operating Sweetwater is different now than it was 10 years ago when all the buildings were brand new. So there's many aspects that need to be considered really early on, and even strategic planning and how to get people involved that can help drive the project so it doesn't end up on a standstill, which is easy to happen when it's such a big, daunting task that you end up sort of stuck. And how do I even proceed from here over the next few years? Yeah. And we often get involved in that as well. People reach out because they've been in the standstill.
Well, there's a lessons learned aspect to it too. I mean, as much as we love Sweetwater, we didn't do everything perfectly. I mean, there are things that we would change if we had to do it again, but they're not major things. But there's stuff we've learned along the way that we pass on to people that they can avoid the some of the. You just when we were doing this, we did this by the seat of our pants with some other farmstead communities to emulate. But at the end of the day, it looks nothing like what we originally thought it was going to be.
Oh, interesting. Well, what would each of you say is a few or one of the most important things that you have learned along the way?
Want to go first, Mark?
I don't want to step on your toes, but I think it's easy to fall in love with property and ignore the service side of things. And we see this more and more as we get into this, is that where you look, you can change anything about your project. You can't change where it's located. And if you're not in a place that will attract families that want to live there, and even more importantly, given shortages of staffing in the direct care industry throughout the United States, you have to be somewhere where staff can both get to your property to work and also live affordably nearby. So we have families that call us and say, "Oh, I want to build a project in San Francisco," and I'm like, you can build it, but you won't be able to staff it because your staff's going to be able to work there. Staff's going to be commuting 2 hours because they're making $20 an hour and they can't live there. So not forgetting the service side and where your services are coming from. And we see it, we've seen it happen time and time again, where a place will get built and they suffer from, they can't find staff.
Oh, and that's a big, expensive
mistake. It's the big mistake probably, because if you can't find services, you can't have residents.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the human aspect of what we do and how is things going to work when you have the building. Now you have it. Now you have the vision and you want to move residents in, but how is it actually going to work? Because there is the collaboration, particularly in California, where landlords and service providers, they all have to come together on this site and work collaboratively to create a life with purpose and meaningful activities and healthy living and a safe environment. And that takes work every single day. That never ends. And I think that's the piece that is really important to consider along the whole project. Yes, building is one thing, finding property, but how is the program going to run on a day-to-day basis? Because we are working with people and things happen with people, things change. There's always something going on, and all these people and stakeholders come together on one site, and how is that going to work?
Yeah.
The only other one I tell people, and you'll see it in all our presentations, is, and it's another mistake. This is not a hobby. I mean, it sounds enchanting and endearing to do something like this, but it's a full-time commitment for at least one person, if not two. And you can't go home at night after working a job and sit around your house and try and make this happen. Yeah. It's a job for somebody, if not more than that.
Yeah. That, as you said, you yourself worked full time for several years.
And if you talk to any of the other people, you look at any of the successful communities that have been built, there is somebody or a couple people that have been behind the scenes, both with time, money, and knowledge, to get it done. Because it's hard to do it alone. I've seen people do it alone, but it's not easy.
Especially a project of this size.
Yours is a large project.
Yeah, my wife and I exchanged something like 6,000 emails over the course of 4 years, back and forth with the other founding family that did this with us. And we went back and counted them. It was like over 6,000 over the course of 1,000 days or something. It was a lot of commitment.
Yeah.
And I want to add to that, there is ongoing commitment after the property is built. We still have Mark is here today. 10 years later, Mark is still very involved, particularly replication at this point. And we have several families that have served on committees and our board, and especially running a nonprofit, you need to have good governance, and our families have been critical and remain critical in that.
Yeah, that's good. Okay. I'm going to turn to our audience questions because we do have a few. The first one I have here is, how did you acquire initial funding for the property?
Okay, I will take that.
I think that's you, Mark.
Yeah, so the initial funding to buy the property, it was a commitment of the two founding families that we got together. We had a target price in mind that we were not going to exceed. And we committed to each other that we would provide the money to buy the land, do the planning, design, and get to the point where we had permits. And we thought that was important to show commitment to other families that would join us later on. That it's hard to raise money with just a vision. If you can show them a piece of property and building elevations and floor plans and say, hey, we're building this, it's easy to attract capital, but you need a couple, at least to do what we did, you need some people early on to have capital.
Yeah.
Because you have to have a site. You have to have a site before you can really attract a lot of money.
Really get a lot of people on board. Yeah.
In our opinion, yeah.
I want to expand on that a little bit, because yes, it took funds from our founders to create Sweetwater, but our founders wanted Sweetwater to be available for anyone. And we do have, as part of our founding principle, discounts where qualifying families and anybody can apply for this. And the fee per month gets significantly reduced to around 20% of our current residents, and has been for the past 10 years. And that is something that we also fundraise for and is part of our nonprofit mission.
That's
So
part of your mission. Yeah.
yeah,
To make it available to all
yes,
levels of
yeah,
income.
all means, and anyone that wants to have an opportunity like this should be able to apply and be considered equally.
Okay. I've got another question. Do families have to arrange for the support staff for their sons or daughters, or does someone at Sweetwater help to arrange all that?
It is all personal choice. So the individual and their family would choose the vendor and the services that they want. However, we have had a long-term relationship with the vendor on site. And of course, they usually meet the vendor as they come to Sweetwater and learn about the services that are currently here. But when we started out, there were several vendors on site. Of course, coordination and staffing, emergency situation, and so on and so forth. It's easier to navigate with one vendor. But it is something that we're usually available to provide as much information as we have, but it is driven by the person and individual choice because we are.
Well, in theory,
yeah.
I mean, the services you're entitled to will show up in your individual program plan.
Yes.
And then you typically have a service coordinator at the regional center level that will refer vendors to you. So the vendor flow comes through the regional center as far as referrals, and then families have a choice
Yes.
of, the one they think is most appropriate for their child.
Okay. So the families are very much involved in those decisions. Yeah.
Yes. And that's my background. I come from my initial work here at Sweetwater was with the vendor and the service provider on site. So we, of course, have a lot of knowledge and experience with vendors and what works and what doesn't work and what's important to ask and what's important to keep in mind as you start looking at these things.
Okay. I think I have a couple more questions. One is, I wonder what Mark and Olivia think about group homes. We own our home. Would it be feasible to move residents in and have a community of 4 residents? I don't know. Okay, I'll leave it at that. What do you make of that question?
It is different. Group homes are under licensing and regulations around that, which is very different from supported living. You could qualify for supported living as well, owning your own home. So it's just different models. Supported living is probably a little bit more flexible. The funding structure looks different. The setup is different. The staff requirement, training, it all looks different. So that would be something that Mark and I would love to talk to the person about and talk about what could work and what their mindset is around this. And that is something we frequently get asked. What structure should we have? Should we be a group home? Should we be supported living? What comes down to just the overall service model for our program? That is a very common question that we get.
In general, our residents probably do receive a higher level of funding and supported living services versus a licensed group. I'm not sure, Kirsten, if the question was specifically about a licensed group home or just a group of people living together. But
Yeah,
if there are the difference, they're dramatically different as far as licensing, staffing, training regulations. I mean, there's a lot of. I mean, group homes have come a long way in the last. I was on the board of Cedars and Marin before this, and they operated and ran group homes, and their funding has gone up dramatically since California has changed their rate models to the point where they are financially feasible now versus 10 years ago. They were closing daily, but the states fixed the funding model a little bit for licensed homes.
Okay.
One thing I want to talk a little bit about is the setup of Sweetwater, because I think that goes into if the group home question is related to how the residents live. So Sweetwater has currently 5 building structures. In the center, we have our community center with my office. Then we have a communal kitchen here that we can use for potlucks and larger gatherings. But each of our homes have 4 bedrooms. Each bedroom has their individual bathroom and a walk-in closet. So no residents share bathroom with anybody else, and they have their own personal space. We have a living room as well as a kitchen and a laundry room. There's also an office and space for staff to have a touchdown spot. And there is a separate bathroom as well used by staff. So we have 4 residents living together in each of our 4 homes.
Okay, which might be a little different from how a group home would be configured.
Yes. And we have seen, yeah, go ahead, Mark.
You're probably not getting at a typical group home. You're not getting 5 we have 5 bathrooms because we built the place, but you're probably in a regular group home. You're sharing bathrooms. Right. Likely. Right. Hopefully not sharing bedrooms, but I think that's even allowable.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And we've seen all kinds of ideas and visions of what different groups want to build and accomplish, and they don't all have to look exactly like Sweetwater. We talk to groups that have shared bathrooms, homes that were built several years ago, and they have to sort of make it work with the current structure of the home. Apartment buildings, communal living for families on the same property as the kids, but separate units. We have talked to endless amounts of ways and versions of how to do this.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I've got one more question here from our audience. Have you seen significant differences from state to state with regard to regulation and support?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I know the answer to that.
Yes,
I bet.
It is very different state from state.
Every state's different, yeah.
We are in California. We are very fortunate to have one of the better entitlement systems for services. The state doesn't really want to get into housing. The state doesn't want to be in the housing business. Mm-hmm. But if you manage to find housing or rent housing or build housing, the service side is excellent.
Make service available.
There's no waiting lists for services. A lot of states have caps on the number of people that can actually access services, especially home and community-based services. California has a cap, but they keep it so high that nobody has to wait on a waiting.
They never.
In other states, you could actually wait for 5-10 years to get home and community-based services. It's very different. It's getting better. It's getting more equitable across the United States, but we are very fortunate where we are. That our regulations and laws are.
And the regional center system doesn't exist in all of the states, so the funding structure look different. And there's typically waiting lists for supported living services or equivalent to supported living. Yes, so each state is different, and when we look at replication, for example, Mark and I will have to spend time on learning what is going on in that current state. And it can even look different. I mean, the regional centers in California all function a little bit different too, and have different sort of contracts with vendors and so on and so forth. So it can look different within a state as well.
Yeah. I think that, so there's sort of like, it's a good news, bad news. Yes, we have services very freely and readily available in, more than pretty much any other state. And yet it's also more expensive to acquire the property.
Yeah.
Which is why 75 to 80% of adults with autism are still living at home in California.
Still living with the parents.
Just because it's finding I mean, there's affordable housing that gets built on occasion, with tax credits and government funding, but it's not always dedicated to the disability population.
Particular community.
And those waiting lists can be 5-10 years at least also.
Right. Okay. All right. So before we wrap up, let's just let people know how they can get in touch with you for whatever reason. If they want to start a community of their own, they're thinking about starting a community, or maybe they want to help your community. How can they get in touch with you?
They can visit our website, sweetwaterspectrum.org, or call our main line. I see that it's listed here. They could also email me directly at olivia@sweetwaterspectrum.org or call me. We're available, and we want to learn what's going on and what people are interested in and what they're doing. And of course, we also invite people to come and set up tours and visit Sweetwater. And I always encourage families that are looking for creating something of their own to visit Sweetwater, as well as other programs. So if they even need resources of Sweetwater and beyond, they can reach out, and we are more than willing to share all the details that we have and connect them with other communities as well.
Great. Thank you both so much. My guest today, Olivia Vane, Executive Director at Sweetwater Spectrum, and Mark Jackson, one of the founders, the original founders of Sweetwater, and probably still its backbone. Thank you so much for being here. I could talk to you for hours about this, but that would not serve you very well.
We do it. We like to
We'll
talk
do
about
it. We love it.
I know you would, but you're both busy people. I need to let you go. I really appreciate
Thank you, Kirsten.
Today.
Thank you so very much for having us.
You are welcome. And thank you, all of our listeners and viewers, for being here today. I hope you learned something. I hope you got something of value out of this particular episode. I know I did. And I look forward to connecting with you next time.
Thank you for joining us today for another episode of Absolute Trust Talk Live. If you enjoyed listening in, then don't forget to subscribe. You can find us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you may listen by searching Absolute Trust Talk. While you're there, we would also love for you to leave us a review. And then why not share your favorite episodes with family, friends, or colleagues too? You can find all of our shows and corresponding show notes by visiting absolutetrustcouncil.com. You'll also find a variety of other free resources, including our ebooks, videos, blogs, presentations, and more. If you need help with your estate planning or administration, we also offer a free discovery call to help get the process started. You can find more information on booking your session by visiting absolutetrustcouncil.com/scheduling. Don't forget to keep an eye out for our next live episode in 2 weeks. If you join us for the broadcast, you can submit questions during the show. But if not, don't worry. You can always get in touch with us by sending a quick message to info@absolutetrustcouncil.com. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you soon.